Hello friends and people who may or may not be friends, welcome to my sort of kitchen. I'd like to talk about something that I've been very concerned with for the past month or so, the TOPIK test, the test of proficiency in Korean. If you want to prove that you can speak Korean, it's pretty good to pass this test. I'm going to talk about all different stuff about the test. The details about it just changed I don't know, last week, this week maybe. Why am I taking it? Because it's time. I'm like, okay, yeah, I know stuff. What's it? I took Korean classes back in university and I got pretty far, but I was better at grammar and better at reading and I guess okay at writing, but my listening was terrible and my speaking was worse because I couldn't really respond to people because I couldn't understand what they were saying. And after living here for, how long? Like 7 years, I realized after a while, I can understand people. At this point, I just know it more naturally, and when I take these practice tests, I kind of ask myself, should I just quickly choose the correct answer, which obviously feels correct, or should I think about it and compare it to all the wrong answers? There are 3 tests comprised of 6 levels, if that makes any sense. There's the beginner test, which is level 1 and 2. There's the intermediate test, which is level 3 and 4, and there's the advanced test, which is 5 and 6. I am aiming for level 2. I'm taking the beginner test. I could probably pass level 3. I think that's kind of where I left off back in university and stuff. Let's say you're taking the beginner test. To pass level 1, you have to get 50% correct, and then to pass level 2, you have to get at least 70%. That holds for 3, level 3, 50%, level 4, 70%, 5 and 6, like that. If you fail level 3, you do not automatically pass level 2. And traditionally, they've been divided up into 4 different sections. There's grammar and vocabulary, there's reading, there's listening, and there's writing. That is also changing. So the changes take effect in July, the July test. One thing that's going to change is instead of being offered 4 times a year, the test is going to be offered 6 times a year. Instead of 3 different tests, there will now only be 2 different tests. There will be beginner for 1 and 2, and then there will be 1 intermediate advanced test for 3, 4, 5, 6. It seems like the only substantial benefit is if you're aiming for level 4 and then you take the test and you happen to guess really, really well and you end up passing level 5. You used to have to get, let's say to pass level 1, more than 50% on each part. So on grammar and vocabulary, you need to get over 50% correct. On listening, over 50% correct. If you were to get over 50% correct on 3 of the parts and less than 50% on 1 of the parts, you fail. That's it. Well, that's changing. So now you just have to get an average of 50%. But they're taking out certain sections. So for beginner, they're getting rid of writing and grammar and vocabulary, and in the other test, they're getting rid of grammar and vocabulary, which is kind of disappointing because for me, grammar and vocabulary is the easiest part. Now, one reason I'm going for the basic test, my listening has kind of picked up, and my grammar, I've always been kind of ahead at grammar, but I'm surprised at how much vocabulary I didn't know, everyday type stuff, but not exactly stuff I stop and think about. I didn't know the word for towel, or I didn't know the word for soap. There's even a reading passage which I was confused because it was about soap that smells like fruit that you give to people, which is a natural situation we all come across, right? It's been easy for me to pick up this kind of missing vocabulary because it's very basic stuff that you do encounter in everyday situations. Just in my case, I don't talk about soap with people. Almost all of the test is multiple choice out of 4 choices. I think it's very fair. Okay, so for a while I was using this book first, and there were some weird passages, and I've been posting some of them on Facebook. One was a kid, his parents are Korean, they live in Korea, but he's born in the US. And the answer was, he's Korean. The other answer choices were obviously wrong, but that one I'm like, well, he's not necessarily Korean, but that kind of thing doesn't show up on the real test. The real test questions are pretty fair. I don't want to say that they're challenging. You don't usually get stuck between 2 choices. For the beginner test, most of the stuff has to do with everyday situations. Going on a mountain or going to the beach, stuff you do with your friends or going to school. Just mostly everyday situations, which is helpful because that means the vocabulary doesn't get too technical. If you're what book should I buy? Don't buy any book. The TOPIK website, www.topic.go.kr, has all the previous tests, all 32 of them. Yes, there have been 32 previous tests. You can download all of them, all the listing files, all that stuff. They're not going to be as helpful for the new stuff because there's no grammar and vocabulary section, but it's it's also probably good to go over those. There's also a really helpful website called topicguide.com. I guess they've been taking all the tests and tracking stuff from all the tests. They even have a list of all the vocabulary from all the beginner tests. In Seoul, there are a total of 5 places that give the test. None of them are down in Gangnam, so I kind of have to go uptown on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m. What you should bring, apparently you just need to bring a form of ID, like a valid form of ID. You have to print out your test ticket. You should bring a pen, but they will also provide a special type of pen for certain questions. I don't really get that. It's written, it's not computer based, and the listening section, they just play a tape in the room, or I guess a CD. They could use tapes, I don't see why not. The listening section for beginner is painfully slow. The syllables are broken up and I have to rethink what they said because they split the word up so it doesn't sound natural. Listening seems pretty easy, and I believe you can take notes during the test, which will be helpful. The only tricky thing, one thing I almost messed up on, is that toward the end of the listening section, they asked 2 questions for each passage that's spoken. Like I'd answer one, but I didn't pay enough attention to answer the second one, but they speak it 2 times. Reading passages can get tricky if they talk about making soap. There have been some cases where I didn't know the vocabulary, where I didn't know the main topic, or I didn't know a few words related to the topic. I was able to choose the right answers even if I didn't really know what it's about. For the writing section, the first 10 questions, you don't have to write it, it's still multiple choice. But then for the next 5, you have to like fill in a blank, and usually with just like 1 or 2 words. If it's a picture, you have to know the word that's related to the picture. But pretty easy, but you gotta be like specific. If people, when people speak, sometimes I leave off articles or stuff like that. You need to put all that into the written section. This has to be very exact and precise. But then at the end of the written section, you have to answer a little essay question. I believe you only have to write like 1 bulky paragraph, and like the topics are very simple. Like, what are you going to do with your friend? You should choose something where you can use pretty simple vocabulary to answer that question. You don't have to be honest. So as of now, it's 4 sections divided into 2 90-minute periods. You take the test over the course of almost 4 hours. So for the beginner and advanced, it's 9 in the morning, and for intermediate, it's like 1 or 2 p.m. After you take the test, it takes about, I don't know, depending on when the test is, usually like 3-4 weeks for the results, your results, the score to come up. They post it online first, and then I believe if you live in Korea, they send like a paper to you that week. And I believe your score is good for up to 2 years. That's not so bad considering in Korea, like TOEIC scores usually last 1 year, I think. Feel free to ask any questions below if there are any more details. We should share our info on this so people can be as prepared as they need to be and do the best they can.